Hello again, and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. It's Thursday the 27th of October. I'm Andrew Wilson, and this is Scotland at 7. This evening, I have the latest daily update from Ukraine on day 246 of the illegal Russian war of aggression and imperial ambition. Then I will introduce our guest for this evening, and then together we will look at today's headlines from Scotland and around the world. The Russian President, Vladimir Putin, is said to have been monitoring drills of the country's strategic nuclear forces involving multiple launches of ballistic and cruise missiles. The drills were seen as a continuation of Moscow's unfounded dirty bomb claims. The prospect of bitter urban fighting for Kherson came closer as Alexei Arestovich, an advisor to the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, said there was no sign of Russians preparing to abandon the city. Ukraine's counter-offensive against Russian forces in Kherson was proving more difficult than it was in the northeast because of wet weather and the terrain, Ukraine's defense minister said. Ukraine is advising refugees currently living abroad not to return until the spring, amid mounting fears over whether the country's damaged energy infrastructure can handle the winter. About 1,000 bodies, including civilians and children, have been exhumed in the recently liberated Kharkiv region, media reports say. This includes the 447 bodies found at a mass burial site near Izium. Ukraine's defense minister, Alexei Reznikov, said he did not believe Russia's President Vladimir Putin would use nuclear weapons. Russia's defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, held a phone call with his Indian and Chinese counterparts and raised Russia's unsubstantiated claims about the possible use of a dirty bomb by Ukraine, Shoigu's ministry has reported. The UN culture agency UNESCO has said it is using before and after satellite imagery to monitor the cultural destruction inflicted by Russia's war in Ukraine, and would make its tracking platform public soon. The United Nations aid chief, Martin Griffiths, said he was relatively optimistic that a UN-brokered deal allowing Black Sea grain exports from Ukraine would be extended beyond mid-November. The European Union could introduce a gas price cap this winter to limit price spikes if countries give Brussels a mandate to propose the measure. And EU regulators are considering extending easier state aid rules that allow governments to support businesses affected by the war in Ukraine to the end of 2023. Now, we are lucky enough to be joined this evening by Maureen Watt, who is a retired politician and former Minister for Mental Health in the Scottish Government. Maureen was the member of the Scottish Parliament representing the constituency of Aberdeen South and North Kincardine from 2011 to 2021, when she retired. Previously, she served as the regional MSP for North East Scotland from 2006 until 2011. Maureen has also been a teacher and a councillor, amongst many other roles. Maureen, good evening. Fit like?
Nae bad. Fit like. Good evening. Thank you very much for having me on.
Nae bad at all, Maureen, and delighted that you're able to join us on Broadcasting Scotland this evening. Our first story this evening is that Suella Braverman is under pressure to answer fresh questions about her resignation as Home Secretary for breaching the ministerial code last week, after new details emerged that cast doubt on her and Rishi Sunak's version of events. The Guardian is reporting that Braverman was challenged by the Cabinet Secretary Simon Case about the leaking of a sensitive document, rather than coming forward herself about what had happened. A government insider said she only owned up to it when she was confronted with the evidence. This follows an intervention by Jake Berry, the former Conservative Party chairman, who said the issue was really serious and added, "As I understand it, the evidence was put to her and she accepted the evidence, rather than the other way around." The account appears to contradict what Sunak said had happened during his first Prime Minister's questions yesterday. The sensitive government information, which Berry said related to cybersecurity, was sent by Braverman using a private email address to a fellow Tory MP, John Hayes, and while trying to copy in Hayes' wife, she mistakenly sent it to a staff member working for another backbencher, Andrew Percy, who informed the Chief Whip of the breach. Case then spoke to the Home Office Permanent Secretary Matthew Rycroft and advised the then Prime Minister Liz Truss that the ministerial code had been broken. The SNP's Shadow Home Secretary, Stuart MacDonald MP, said, Rishi Sunak has trashed all claims of leading with integrity and accountability as he prioritises grubby backroom deals, ahead of upholding the ministerial code and national security. The fact that the discredited Home Secretary is still in place, despite reports that she may have committed multiple breaches of the ministerial code, raises serious questions for Rishi Sunak that he cannot sweep under the carpet. So, Maureen, as ever with right-wing politicians, it's not the original law-breaking or ministerial code-breaking which brings them down, it's the cover-up. Braverman said she brought up the problem. Others now say that she didn't. She says that she didn't have a government phone on her because she was joining a police operation. Others say the police operation had finished long before she sent the email, which had confidential cabinet papers attached. So do you think, is there a prospect that Suella Braverman's going to be the shortest-serving Home Secretary?
Well, Suella Braverman equals very loose cannon. I honestly cannot understand that woman at all, and I really cannot understand Rishi Sunak rehiring her, if you like, to such a sensitive post as Home Secretary. I mean, anyone who read her resignation letter must think, what's this woman on? It was disgraceful, absolutely disgraceful. And it sounds to me that she hasn't yet learned what being a minister is about, and when you use your secretary to put out emails, and that you desist from such yourself. She obviously hasn't taken the responsibility of being a cabinet secretary to heart. She obviously has not read the ministerial code, or if she has, she thinks she's above it and ignoring it. Now, is that surprising of the current crop of Tories?
Well, absolutely, Maureen. We'll be talking about the talent puddle in Westminster in a moment. But if I wondered whether the focus this week, so soon after the new Prime Minister took office and reappointed her, might be a reflection of the internecine warfare between various warring clans which currently make up the Tory party. After all, the former Conservative Party chairman, Jake Berry, himself sacked by Sunak, appeared to question the decision in an interview on Talk TV late yesterday, saying that Braverman had in fact committed multiple breaches. So are we seeing hostilities breaking out in the Tory party after only 2 or 3 days?
Well, let's face it, Andrew, I don't think they're ever going to go away. I think they need a period in opposition to make them take a turn to themselves. And I hope that comes sooner rather than later. We desperately, desperately need a general election in this country. And I think that, they're not just two, there are at least three parties within the Tory party now. Brexit, you would have thought, might have made them come together a bit more, but it's made them even worse. And they are totally and utterly unfit to govern. I mean, I don't say that lightly. They really, really are unfit to govern. None of them seem to be concentrating on the day job that they've got as cabinet secretaries, as ministers, or as MPs. And they seem to be just fighting among themselves like ferrets, even in different sacks. It's absolutely appalling. It is embarrassing on the international stage, and I just wish it would be over. I thought maybe that Sunak might be a bit of a new broom, and things might be a little different. I think I was hoping against hope, but it doesn't really look like it, does it?
Well, it is quite astonishing, as you say, Maureen. Insofar as the Brexit, the ERG, one of the warring clans inside the Tory party, and the ERG won. They won Brexit. Why do you think that they and the rest of the Tories can't get over the fact that they won?
I know it is unfathomable, really. The ERG did win, and the party has moved so far to the right that you never hear of UKIP nowadays, because all the UKIPers seem to be in the far right of the Tory party. And One Nation Tories that I kind of grew up with, the likes of the late Alec Buchanan Smith and people, they would be must be turning in their graves at the Tory party as is now. And there really isn't the kind of One Nation Tories, or if there are, there must be very few of them because they're not making their voice heard at all, are they? So, oh, I really hope this Tory party is on the way out sooner rather than later.
Well, that's a very good point that you make, Maureen, in contrasting with, as you say, the traditional one nation Tories who we all grew up with. Insofar as the ERG and the right wing factions inside the Tory party appear to focus only on self advancement and division as their political policies, and there are no other policies, it's just about dividing and about seeing who can get up the greasy pole the highest. Do you think that the likelihood is that because that's the only way in which they know how to operate, that's all that we're going to get until, as you say, a general election is finally called?
Well, yeah, because you don't see them once they're in there articulating what exactly it is they want to do, and those few that have, it's absolutely horrific. Like Suella Braverman saying she can't wait till she sees a plane off carrying refugees to Rwanda. I think she said something much stronger than that. But, um, you know, you haven't seen them actually sit down on the media and say what it is they're actually going to do. And if the rest of them are anything like the previous leader, and have policies that are just going to make trash our economy and make Britain's situation worse. I mean, just how much are ordinary folks supposed to take of this? I mean, if you said it was happening in another country, you would say, oh, it's a third world country, it's a banana republic. But it's happening in what's supposed to be the motherland of democracy. It's just, you couldn't make it up, could you, really? It's just so bad.
It's a good point that you make, and I've certainly heard a number of commentators making the point about whether or not the UK yet qualifies as a failed state because of the
Mm,
state of our politics over the
yeah.
last 6 months, if not longer. But let's come back to Braverman for a moment, because when she was appointed Home Secretary, it is said that MI5 raised when she was appointed Attorney General, it's said that MI5 raised concerns about her. And of course, similar concerns persisted around Boris Johnson when he was Foreign Secretary. It's said that MI5 objected in the strongest possible terms that they were going to find that MI6 was going to be answerable to Boris Johnson because of his connection with Lebedev and with former KGB officers. So I know that the talent pool, as you were saying, the talent puddle in the Tory party has almost completely dried up. But might it be a good idea to take security concerns seriously and not appoint politicians to sensitive high office where there are security concerns? Without being disrespectful to our friends in Cymru, could Braverman not have been made Secretary of State for Wales or something more suitable?
I wouldn't even impose it on Wales. Come on, Andrew, you couldn't do that. Um, you just need to stand up to these folk, to folk like Suella Braverman, whom you say is desperate to climb the greasy pole. But why would you want to climb the greasy pole if you're not prepared to do something that's meaningful with the position that you get? I mean, ministerial office, to me, having been in three portfolios, is not something you go around boasting about. You go around kind of thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to make this work? And how am I going to make people's lives better in the portfolio I've got? Not just, I want to be known as Home Secretary and do absolutely nothing with it. That's what gets me, having, some experience of doing this. And I mean, Suella Braverman has apparently today have had to sit down with, as you say, security personnel to show her exactly the seriousness of her job. And I cannot see her lasting. Surely not.
Well, it's a very good point. I was just reflecting on that, Maureen. You know perfectly well, and I know perfectly well, that if we had done what she had done, we would be sacked and we would not be given our jobs back. But it seems to
Exactly.
be a different rule for Conservative cabinet ministers. But that's enough about Suella Braverman. Let's move on now, because Rishi Sunak will not attend the COP27 climate summit, Downing Street has said, despite the new British Prime Minister having promised this week to prioritise the environment. Liz Truss had reportedly planned to go to at least one day of the summit, but Sunak's spokesperson said he had other pressing domestic commitments. The environment sector had been hoping Sunak would take the climate crisis more seriously than Truss. Some positive signals came early this week when the new Conservative leader announced he would uphold the ban on fracking, a commitment that was made in the 2019 Tory manifesto. The spokesperson said the autumn budget was among Sunak's top priorities, but that the government remained committed to net zero and to leading international and domestic action to tackle climate change. It is not known whether Sunak will allow King Charles to attend COP27. Truss was reported to have advised against it, despite him having attended COP26 in Glasgow last year as the then heir to the throne. The Queen gave a video message to attendees. So, Maureen, is all of this an early indication that Sunak, and by extension the Tory party, does not take the climate crisis seriously? Or is it, as Downing Street would say, just an unfortunate clash with the ever-changing date of the autumn statement?
If you're going to take climate change seriously, you go to the COP meetings. Absolutely. And I think maybe that it was Boris Johnson that was an aberration for the Tories because of his partner and subsequent wife was very into the environment, and that Truss and Sunak are just showing up the Tories as they are. I don't think that they are interested in the climate at all. I think I said on a previous programme I was on, even if Truss had said sustainable growth, sustainable growth, sustainable growth, she might have had a chance of being taken a bit more seriously. But to me, climate under under Truss and now Sunak has gone really far down the agenda. I was actually hoping that after meeting Prince Charles, and I heard that the meeting went on longer than was timetabled for, that perhaps Sunak might come out and say that he's changed his mind and Prince Charles could go to COP27 in Egypt. I think that would have been a good signal, but the fact that neither the King nor Sunak is going, and I tried to look up who was climate minister. It certainly wasn't somebody whose name sprung out at me thinking I know them. So I do fear for Britain's commitment now to climate change and net zero. But we'll see what actions they come up with. But I think, going to COP at a very senior level and showing your commitment is absolutely vital. And again, will be posted missing on the international stage.
That's a good point that you make, Maureen. I too cannot remember the name of the new climate minister who's been appointed, but certainly it was commented on today that neither he nor Alok Sharma, who was the president of COP26, they will now, both of them will now no longer attend cabinet meetings.
Yeah.
But Britain became the first major economy to pass a net zero emissions law and made a big push as the host of COP26, the UN climate talks, which took place in Glasgow last November. Investors called on Liz Truss to maintain those ambitions, though she lifted a national moratorium, an English moratorium on exploration for shale gas. Of course, Rishi Sunak then reinstated the ban. And I wondered, is that not the root of the issue here? There's been a Tory government for 12 years, but there has at no time been a consistent, well-thought-out plan. It's all short-term reaction to circumstances and political expediency.
Yes, and I think, when they would listen, our own First Minister has made it very clear that short-termism in terms of combating the effects of gas prices is not to go for more exploration of oil and gas. It is to continue to increase the amount of money spent on retrofitting old houses and making sure that insulation is much better. It is going for renewables. Scotland is leading on not just wind power, but also on green hydrogen. That is the way to go. And it's not as if these are not more quick fixes than going, for example, oil and gas exploration, which, as in a previous life, I did work for an oil drilling company, takes ages, years and years. And so going for more wind, solar and wave is the way to go. Even, some of these wave is proving really quite difficult to get right. But these other sources of energy are much quicker than oil and gas exploration, and also the building of nuclear plants. I mean, we've seen how long it is taking to build. Is it Sizewell B? I think it is, and the escalating costs of that. I cannot understand why they're going down this route. I really can't. There must be extremely um, vocal lobbies for these old industries rather than the renewables.
Well, Maureen, as usual, you are ahead of the game here because the next item we're going to talk about will include a discussion and a consideration of the continued extraction of oil and gas from the North Sea sector. But it's in the context of the windfall tax, because Shell has paid zero windfall tax this year in the UK, despite making record global profits of nearly $30 billion so far this year, prompting calls for the government to overhaul a scheme that was supposed to raise billions to tackle the cost of living crisis. The UK headquartered oil company said it had not paid the levy and did not expect to pay the levy through 2022 because its British corporate entity did not make any profits during the quarter, in part because of heavy spending on drilling for more oil and gas in the North Sea. Rishi Sunak, who took office as Prime Minister on Tuesday, introduced the Energy Profits Levy in May when he was Chancellor to help pay for support for British households hit by the cost of living crisis. The government said that it had expected to raise £5 billion from the Energy Profits Levy, but some analysts have warned that extensive use of tax reliefs could lead to much less being recouped. Opposition parties called for a rethink, saying a proper windfall tax was needed, while the Trade Union Congress described Shell's profits as obscene. Sunak introduced the scheme after coming under intense political pressure, acknowledging the sector was making extraordinary profits, not as a result of recent changes or risk-taking or innovation or efficiency, but simply as the result of surging global commodity prices, driven in part by Russia's war in Ukraine. However, Sunak's scheme also introduced extended tax breaks for investment in extraction in North Sea oil fields. So, Maureen, the extended tax breaks mean that for every £1 businesses spend in the North Sea, they could reduce their taxes by 91 pence. And also the windfall tax, or what we were told was the windfall tax, does not cover profits made from forecourts, from refining, or from trading shipments of oil and gas, areas where Shell and other oil majors have made huge sums of money this year. So whatever it was that Sunak introduced back in May, it was never a windfall tax, was it?
Well, it certainly doesn't look like it. And I don't think that people quite understand just how much, how 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 big the tax breaks are for oil and gas companies exploring in the UK continental shelf. It's always been the case, and compared to the bargains that other countries like Norway, for example, negotiate with the oil companies, the UK government has always been a bit of a pushover. So I did hear today that the boss of Shell was saying that, he thought that they should be subject to a windfall tax. But now that you've said that, Andrew, is that because he knows that they won't end up paying for it because of the tax breaks they get? Or is he seriously saying, yes, our profits are obscene and you should be taxing us? But it surely is not, well, I was going to say it's surely not beyond the wit of this government. But I mean, they have clever civil servants. It must be possible. And if they can't do it themselves, why don't they go and look and see what the EU is doing? Because they're introducing a windfall tax. And other countries, I think, have as well. So it is possible to do it. But our tax system is so complicated, and there are so many highly paid tax consultants looking for every single loophole for these big companies who can afford to do that and employ these people, that the whole system, I think, is broken, which is why I would really love independence so that we can start building a system from scratch that isn't so damn complicated and actually get some money out of these big corporations and into the hands of the people that are really struggling to pay their energy bills at the moment.
Thanks, Maureen. A very good point, very well made. But let's move on now, because Northern Ireland is on course for a snap election after a recall of the Stormont Assembly failed to elect a speaker or to break political deadlock. The Democratic Unionist Party blocked an attempt to revive the Assembly and Executive earlier today, perpetuating paralysis and running down the clock to a midnight deadline to restore devolved government. The party rebuffed appeals by the Prime Minister, business leaders, and other parties, saying it had a mandate from its supporters to boycott Stormont unless unionist objections to the post-Brexit Irish Sea border were resolved. If power sharing is not revived before Friday, by law, caretaker ministers must step down to be replaced by civil servants, and there must be an Assembly election within 12 weeks. The Assembly recall, requested by Sinn Féin and Alliance, followed inconclusive talks on Wednesday between the Northern Ireland Secretary, Chris Heaton-Harris, and party leaders, including the DUP leader, Jeffrey Donaldson. Michelle O'Neill, Sinn Féin's vice president, said people were bewildered and accused the DUP leader, Jeffrey Donaldson, of blocking democracy. This is his mess and a failure of leadership by him and his party. Naomi Long of the Alliance Party said politicians were placing party interests over those of a region where public services were on their knees. The Ulster Unionist Party leader Doug Beattie said anger in the chamber was nothing compared to what voters were feeling, adding, "I guess we're all going to feel that anger in the next 6 or 7 weeks." And Matthew O'Toole, the Stormont leader of the Social Democratic and Labour Party, said another election would be a farce. "My party is not responsible for that mess, but I'm ashamed by it," he said. So, Maureen, is the collapsing of democracy in Northern Ireland by the DUP, is it shameful?
In my view, absolutely, absolutely shameful. I mean, they're still smarting from the fact that they did so poorly in the last election, and that Sinn Féin emerged as the largest party, and the Alliance did so well. If there is going to be another election, which looks like, and we know what it's like campaigning in elections in the winter, and we did it in 2019. It's not fun, but I really hope that the electorate of Northern Ireland do go out and vote, and really hundreds of thousands of folk make their views known, because it's really important that the DUP, whose support base is dwindling, they are old men in grey suits who really are not representative now of the young folk in Northern Ireland. I really hope that people do go out and vote, that the DUP vote and the Unionist vote falls further, and that Ireland, the Northern Ireland, who can see how Era and Dublin is really motoring forward with their economy, see what can happen if the alliance, if Sinn Féin and the alliance could get control of Stormont and really get the assembly back up and running, because people are really suffering, because nothing can be changed. Civil servants can run things, but they continue with whatever's happening now. Civil servants can't change legislation, and other things that are so desperately needed. For example, in their health service, which is really, I think, the worst of the four nations. So the DUP really should get a real kicking in the upcoming elections, because they are really holding Northern Ireland and its people back, in my view.
Thanks, Maureen. I was going to expand the conversation to think about the way in which the position of Jeffrey Donaldson and the DUP, it might be similar to that of Douglas Ross and the Tories in Scotland, but time is against us this evening, so let's hold that over for another occasion. I'm sure it's something that we'll get into as we get closer to the elections in the north of Ireland, which now seem inevitable. But let's move on now, because the First Minister has confirmed that she has spoken to Police Scotland's Chief Constable in regard to allegations of an undeclared Chinese state police base in Scotland, which allegations are being taken extremely seriously. This follows a parliamentary question by Ross Greer MSP about a report by human rights organisation Safeguard Defenders, which claims that one such office is operating in Glasgow, and confirmation from the Dutch government that they will investigate claims of similar bases in the Netherlands. The allegations come just days after the Chinese Consul General in Manchester dragged a protester inside the gates of the consulate, where he and his staff then assaulted him. The activities of the Chinese government in Scotland and the wider UK have come under increased scrutiny in recent years. In 2019, Edinburgh University students who had come from Hong Kong reported being targeted and intimidated by individuals associated with the Beijing regime. Commenting, the Scottish Greens External Affairs spokesperson Ross Greer MSP said, "These allegations are extremely concerning and clearly merit immediate investigation." So, Maureen, this story has probably come to light after the events, as I mentioned, outside the consulate in Manchester, and also recent statements by the US Attorney General regarding Chinese espionage and the announcement from the Dutch government regarding their investigations. But at the moment, we don't have very many facts. There are allegations, and when I was reading the story, I was a little concerned with the lack of facts being put forward at the moment. Does this run the risk of putting people at risk of unprovoked attacks, given the history we've seen of unprovoked attacks on people during the COVID crisis, as Donald Trump insisted on laying the blame for the pandemic at the door of Beijing?
Well, there's a lot in that to unpack, Andrew. Yes, it's difficult. It's difficult to comment on these allegations, but I like Ross Greer. I don't think he would make allegations if there wasn't something behind them. And the fact that it's happening allegedly in Manchester, in Glasgow, and in the Netherlands does make you wonder. I mean, this, if it's true, shouldn't really be new to us. We shouldn't really be surprised, because the Belt and Road Initiative of the Chinese government this could be all part of that, those desires that the Chinese government have. And, with the president getting another term of government when he shouldn't, another 10 years in power, probably does make the Chinese government think that they can do what they want, especially when they see countries like the UK in such turmoil. But we've also got to know that the Chinese economy is not that secure with such big COVID lockdowns. And I hope that countries that have outsourced and offshored manufacturing to China in the past really think about if that's what they want to do in the long term, because it's created a huge state, very wealthy state, albeit not fairly distributed well. And that's why it's so important that organizations like the G7, the G20, United Nations really try and sit down and work out what the long-term strategy should be in terms of economic, social, and human rights in the world, and particularly in relation to China.
Absolutely, Maureen. Excuse me. And one other thing that crossed my mind in the connection with this story was, is it maybe the case that the issue here is that the Chinese have chosen a different route to indulge and to operate in the turmoil in UK politics that you mentioned. It's just that they've chosen a different route to the Russians, who of course acquire influence by paying Conservative politicians hundreds of thousands of pounds in political donations.
Yeah, no comment.
Thanks, Maureen. Let's move on, however. Elon Musk has claimed that he has acquired Twitter in a post to the social network, reassuring advertisers it will stay a safe place for their brands amid fears one of his first actions as chief executive will be to restore Donald Trump's account. After months of uncertainty over whether or not his $44 billion acquisition of the social media platform would go through, the Tesla chief executive's post is the strongest acknowledgement yet that the deal is expected to be sealed before its deadline of 5 p.m. in Delaware on Friday. Musk wrote in a statement attached to the tweet, "The reason I acquired Twitter is because it is important to the future of civilization to have a common digital town square, where a wide range of beliefs can be debated in a healthy manner without resorting to violence." He added, "That is why I bought Twitter. I didn't do it because it would be easy. I didn't do it to make more money. I did it to try to help humanity, whom I love." Despite his use of the past tense, he did not legally own Twitter at the time of the post, and the company continued to trade on the New York Stock Exchange. The final paperwork is expected to be completed by tomorrow afternoon, US time. He published a tweet a day after visiting the company's headquarters in San Francisco and posting a video of himself entering the building while carrying a sink, with the caption, "Entering Twitter HQ, let that sink in." On Wednesday, Musk also changed his Twitter handle to Chief Twit. Despite Musk being the world's richest man, Twitter's revenue will have to stay high, even as a private company. The loans he has taken out to buy it will lead to an interest bill of about $1 billion a year, which he will need to pay out of the platform's profits. So, Maureen, in his statement, Musk said, "There is currently great danger that social media will splinter into far right-wing and far left-wing echo chambers that generate more hate and divide our society. That said, Twitter obviously cannot become a free-for-all hellscape where anything can be said with no consequences." Now, that's pretty much what it is, isn't it? Thus far, Twitter's algorithm has primarily amplified extreme rhetoric, turning the conversation into for and against debates that spark engagement and thereby advertising profits for Twitter. Misinformation and offensive sentiment are rife on the platform.
Yes, absolutely. Twitter is a horrible place. Well, can be a horrible place. I'm sure we've all experienced just how horrible it can be. People think they can say things on Twitter that will never, ever in a million years say to your face. But on your intro there, Andrew, it just seems to me that Elon Musk is all over the place. He doesn't really seem to have a strategy of exactly where he think what Twitter should be for and what it should do and what changes it makes. If the only change that he makes is that he allows Donald Trump back in, that will give carte blanche to Trump followers and the alt-right in the United States to pile even more venom on to the platform. So Twitter, though, did get themselves in an awful mess in terms of this acquisition. Goodness knows what they were thinking of, because they've really had to, in the end, I think, sell it to Elon Musk, whether they like it or not. And, you know, hell mend them for being so naive in this. But I'm not looking forward to a Twitter owned and run by Elon Musk.
Well, absolutely, Maureen. I think it's fair to say that Twitter so far has rarely made the world a better place, and Musk has rarely fully engaged with philanthropy. He certainly resembles a philanthropist in many ways. He's opinionated, smart, forward-thinking. He yields great wealth, but arguably his superpower, right or wrong, is his influence. So are you buying the philanthropic angle here, or is this just about Musk increasing his worldwide influence?
Well, I'm not. I'm not taking the philanthropy angle. Elon Musk wouldn't do anything unless it was going to further increase his coffers. I think, though, Andrew, we need to get this into perspective. You know, the number of people in total who are on Twitter is actually very small. Facebook still has more folk than Twitter, and I think Instagram and TikTok among the young is much more prevalent. So we've got to put it in perspective. Hopefully, it does just become an echo chamber for the alt right. But yeah, we just need to wait and see. But Elon Musk doing it out of the goodness of his heart. Nah, I don't think so.
Thanks, Maureen. You, as ever, you give great perspective on these stories. I'm very grateful to you. But let's move on again now, because the Scottish Parliament has voted in favour of the Gender Recognition Reform Scotland Bill at stage 1. The result of the vote was 88 votes for, 33 against, and 4 abstentions. Despite an SNP whip to vote in favour of the bill, SNP MSPs Ash Regan, Fergus Ewing, John Mason, Stephanie Callaghan, Michelle Thompson, Kenneth Gibson, and Ruth Maguire voted against. Earlier, the First Minister had accepted Ash Regan's resignation from her position as Minister for Community Safety. Conservative MSPs Jamie Green and Sandesh Gulhani voted in support of the bill. Commenting after the vote, the Scottish Greens Equality spokesperson Maggie Chapman MSP said, "This is a crucial step for equality, and I am delighted that we have taken a big leap towards delivering it." So, Maureen, firstly, the Gender Recognition Reform Scotland Bill has been widely supported by campaigners and is supported by every party in Holyrood, barring the Scottish Conservatives. So does that give us any insight as to what's going on in the current debate?
Well, I think the Tories probably oppose for opposition's sake here, and it is interesting that two of their number voted for the bill and another two abstained. Um, in terms of those who voted against the bill at stage 1 from the SNP, I'm not surprised. If you'd asked me to name some names whom I thought might do, I would have come up with most of those. They have been against it from the start. But this is a bill that we've seen today that is supported across Parliament. It is the bill that has been the most widely consulted and long consulted on, I think, of any government bill. And it's just, in my view, time that we get on with it and get it passed into legislation, show that many of the fears of genuine fears of people will not come to pass, and that we will be a more just and more equal society and embracing everyone regardless of their gender identity.
Thanks, Maureen. Now, the Honourable Lord Brailsford, a Senator of the College of Justice of Scotland, will be the new chair of the Scottish COVID-19 inquiry, the Deputy First Minister John Swinney has confirmed in a statement to Parliament. Lord Brailsford will replace Lady Poole on Friday the 28th of October. It will now be a matter for Lord Brailsford to determine how handover arrangements will work in practice to best support continuity within the work of the inquiry. The Deputy First Minister also confirmed an amendment will be made to the inquiry's terms of reference to include a clear reference to a human rights-based approach. This addition further emphasises the expectation that the inquiry will take a human rights-based approach and that it will demonstrate how that approach has informed and improved the recommendations that it eventually makes. Mr Swinney said, "The Scottish Government wants the Scottish COVID-19 inquiry to be delivered at speed and to address the range of questions that people have, the bereaved in particular, so that we can learn lessons and benefit from them as early as possible. That is why arrangements for identifying a new judicial chair for the inquiry have been taken forward urgently to ensure a swift and successful transition. From my own and the First Minister's interactions with Lord Brailsford, I am in no doubt that he has the necessary leadership skills, integrity and experience to continue the work of this inquiry. So, Maureen, with the statement that John Twinney made this afternoon, confirming that Lord Brailsford will take over from Lady Poole, is that now a case of back to business for the inquiry team?
Yes, I really do hope so, and I'm really impressed that John Swinney has got a new chair of the committee so swiftly. I think a number of members of the inquiry also resigned, so they need to be replaced as quickly as possible by the new chair, Lord Brailsford, and that together they move forward as swiftly as possible and take the evidence from, as you said, those bereaved families and those affected with long COVID. It's really important for a little bit more closure, for people to get their thoughts and their recommendations and their feelings about how COVID was handled off their chest, and make them feel that they have made a contribution to making things better if, God forbid, that we ever find ourselves in a similar pandemic again. So I'm really pleased that this is moving forward at such a pace now.
Thanks, Maureen. I was intrigued by this additional confirmation that an amendment will be made to the terms of reference to include a clear reference to a human rights-based approach. This addition, which is said to further emphasise the expectation that the inquiry will be able to demonstrate how a human rights-based approach has informed and improved the recommendations that it makes. But I was wondering, thinking of examples we've seen in other inquiries and in inquiry processes now in the UK, is a human rights-based approach at this stage going to help, or is it going to hinder the establishment of the facts which you were just talking about?
Well, I really do hope that it will help. And I think if you're thinking about human rights and thinking about people feeling that getting an inquiry and getting a report out as soon as possible and not things dragging on, that it will focus the minds of those members of the inquiry to get this done quickly. We've known of inquiries that have taken years. I mean, look at the trams inquiry, for example. The infected blood inquiry took ages and ages, and I remember getting presented as Minister for Public Health with the reams and reams of volumes of documents relating to that inquiry. So I hope that the legal fraternity do not necessarily think that you require reams and reams of stuff and it takes a long time to get justice. And I think human rights hopefully will have some influence in that, but that's just my opinion.
Thanks, Maureen. And finally, on this story, I'm not for one word saying anything against Neil Brailsford personally, but I was just wondering more generally, you were talking there about the experience of other inquiries recently. I was wondering, are judges necessarily the best placed people to lead inquiries like this?
Well, there is the argument that you need, a kind of legal brain to sift through all the evidence and, with experience, know what to take for genuine and gospel and what to discard. So I think a legal mind is probably required at the helm, but I think a broad range of talents is required among the other members of the inquiry, and hopefully they'll feel able to really make their mark and have some decent debate and perhaps some out of the box thinking in terms of what is required in terms of outcomes from this inquiry, having, of course, listened to all those involved. I mean, we really need to hear, from the health service, for example, and nurses and doctors who worked at the sharp end dealing with the worst of it, before we had the vaccines. So This is a really important inquiry. We haven't had a pandemic in 100 years, and um, there was an inquiry after the last one, I think, but things have moved on so much. I really think this is really important.
Thanks, Maureen. And now let's move to our final item this evening, because Glasgow has become the first city in the UK to adopt a feminist town planning approach in a bid to make Glasgow work for women. At Glasgow City Council, councillors backed a motion from the Green councillor Holly Bruce, which will see Scotland's largest city making women central to all aspects of planning, public realm design, policy development, and budgets. Feminist town planning centres on the needs and perspectives of women in decisions around infrastructure and the design of public spaces. Changes in the city's infrastructure could include wider pavements to accommodate buggies, more and better lighting in parks, and safer active travel routes. Councillor Holly Bruce said, "I'm delighted that our motion received unanimous support from across the chamber today, and it's so exciting to consider how much better Glasgow can become with a feminist approach to designing our city. For too long, our streets, parks and buildings have been designed by men. The apparently gender-neutral approach that we've used for centuries has meant that the male perspective has become the default. These shortcomings have often been unintended and are an obvious consequence of having too few women in the rooms where decisions are made." So, Maureen, that's the case in lots of aspects of life, isn't it, that we experience at the moment? So do you think, can urban planning and design of the public realm, can that be a first important step in reversing the gender-neutral approach which we've used for centuries, but which was nothing of the sort?
Absolutely, it can. I mean, there are still some people that don't think we should have gender parity in our parliaments and our local councils. And this is exactly an example of why it is necessary. I mean, I can think of in the Transport Committee, exactly when we're talking about wider pavements, the pavements should be wide enough for two double buggies to pass, for example, or a buggy and a cyclist. So I really welcome this. I hope it's other councils decide to do the same. I mean, I personally think that post-COVID, we should not be building any high-rise flats, for example, without balconies. I mean, when you think that when we were all locked up and couldn't go out as normal, having a balcony would I have thought, especially if you're in a flat with children, would have been absolutely essential. I mean, you couldn't even go down to your drying green. So, I think it's absolutely vital that women's issues are taken into account in all aspects of planning. And I think, to be fair, we are moving in that direction. We're talking about 20-minute communities where you should be able to access most of the services that you need for your daily life within 20 minutes of your home. And I think moving to that will really make a difference in people's lives. And as you said, open green spaces and play parks and things like that, given the attention that they really deserve, is really important.
That's an interesting point that you make, Maureen. I think it's Paris, which the city of Paris, or the Mairie of Paris, which is at the forefront of, as you say, the 20-minute communities where you can walk within a 20-minute walk. All of the services that you require are available. Now, I suppose Glasgow has a mixed history of taking planning inspiration from France. I'm thinking of Hutchison Town in the Gorbals, which was a Le Corbusier design, which didn't work at all. But do you think that there is scope here for increased cooperation between Scottish cities and the planning authorities and other European cities, perhaps for an exchange of policy and exchange of policy development in both directions, not simply importing practice from other countries, but also exporting some of the good planning policies and also this evolution in planning policy in Glasgow, so to help Scotland to promote a feminist town planning approach.
Well, I'm always in favour of learning from international colleagues on what can be done, with the caveat that, buildings that are suitable in France and Italy and Spain are not are not necessarily and definitely not really compatible with the Scottish weather. We should be looking at Scandinavian colleagues and that kind of things. And in the past, as you say, Andrew, that's not always been the case. So all of this with a lump of common sense dropped in is really important.
Maureen, thank you. That sounds like the perfect recipe. But I'm afraid that's all that we have time for this evening. In making these programmes, Broadcasting Scotland relies on the support of viewers and others who value our distinctive approach to news, culture and current affairs. Please help us to continue to make these programmes, to continue to develop the station, and to make new programmes for you. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 per month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. We have set ourselves a target of adding 10,000 new subscribers to enable us to employ staff to make more programmes. There are other ways in which you can contribute to our work. If you would like to volunteer to work with Broadcasting Scotland, either behind the scenes or in front of the cameras, or in any other way that helps our work, then please visit our website at www.broadcastingscotland.scot and send us a message there. You can find us on Twitter at BroadcastScot. Please like and retweet us there. And you can also find us on Facebook by searching for Broadcasting Scotland. When you're watching us on YouTube, it would be great if you would like and subscribe to Broadcasting Scotland on that platform. Meantime, we will be here again tomorrow with the next edition of Scotland at 7, so please come back and enjoy our programme again tomorrow evening. I'd like to thank everyone who's been watching this evening, and I'd like to give very special thanks to our very special guest, Maureen Watt. Thanks, Maureen.
You're welcome. Slater. See you later.
Thanks, Maureen. On this day in 2017, Catalonia's parliament voted to declare the region independent from Spain, resulting in the central government's dismissing that legislative body and calling for new elections in which the majority of seats were once more claimed by the pro-independence movement. But that's the way it is at very nearly Scotland at 8. Please have a very peaceful evening. Bye-bye.